Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Voice of CIO. What a blast did we have with Andrea Ballinger's last podcast. And we can't wait to unravel because she had loads of wisdom packed. And we thought we have to do justice to this episode to talk about 2 to 3 key areas. One is on governance and funding and people, right? These are three important elements. So let's start firing in right away, Andrea. Welcome back. One of the most important part today with the AI transformation and stuff is, do they have guardrails? Do we do the right things to do, including cybersecurity? Governance is a big topic. And a lot of times people think governance is all about policing and saying what people are going wrong, auditing and stuff like that. First, let's understand from your perspective, what does governance mean? Is it actually delaying us to transform faster? Is it like the thing and pulling up the lever? Or what is it to look like? Can you just tell us how is it perceived and how have you changed that model in the state of Oregon? How did you handle that?
Thank you for that, because governance is exactly what you're describing for depending on who you ask for. In fact, when I started here at OSU, this is not my first institution, but when I started and I did my 100 days, I was asking about governance. And there were two different numbers that came up. Oh, we attempted this 15 times and we failed. We attempted it 17 times. And I would always ask, what is governance to you? Oh, and then they would talk about shared governance in terms of the faculty senate. And I'm like, no, 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 IT governance. Let's talk about IT
Yeah.
governance. What does that mean? It's the group that tells us no, that we can't buy that software, that we can't do this. And I said, oof, I have a long ways to go with this team, right? So governance to me is exactly the opposite, and you were alluding to that, is a group of non-IT people. Let me underscore this, a group of non-IT people, stakeholders that have a stake on the usability and the ability to use technology in the institution. A group of folks that can help strategically think about where should I put my money at? I'm the CIO, so I have a budget and I have access to funding for projects. Who is going to help me identify what's the priority? What's hot that I need to be investing on?
Right.
What is this is beside the keep the lights on. Of course, I need to pay for network, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about if I have funds to actually put someplace, where should I be looking at? That's governance, is a group of stakeholders that have a clear vision of what the strategy is and understand that I am a catalyst to helping them get to that strategy, help me figure out where to spend it.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And part of the governance was you started to look at elements. So how did you look at metrics, review cycles, and benefit tracking? Because at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. Okay,
Oh,
what have
yes.
you done, and what are the results? So what would you focus on when it comes to the metrics when it comes to governance? I mean, I'm a big proponent of IT governance because I'm certified in the governance of enterprise IT. But I love the definition that you talked about, which is in non-IT stakeholders. Let's not throw jargons that those people away part of it. But
No.
how do you inculcate the right level of metrics, review cycles? Tell me a little bit about how did you go about institutionalizing those aspects?
That's great. So I elevated what IT governance was all about here. So I assembled this group of folks, and the provost not only approved it, I report to the provost, so not only approved it, but he and I had a lot of discussions about why you choosing that person, because I had met all of these people when I did my 100 days. I brought people that were going to be critical thinkers, people that had mission oriented visions,
Right.
and that were comfortable arguing the cases. Okay, so I this is prerequisite for the people involved. I elevated because I said, what you're helping me with is to spend money.
Mm.
You're going to help me. So by attaching funding to their core reason to being there, Suresh, I got them to say, "Oh, this is different. This is not just saying, oh, I'm going to use Microsoft this or do that. No, no, no. It's investment." So started there. So the key performance indicators was a discussion that we had with them. We brought them together and I explained what I wanted and what I needed their help with, and explaining there's not a magic pot of money sitting on the side. I'm saying, help me figure it out. What is the business case that I need to make to the big bosses, the
Correct.
president, the CFO, and the provost for investment in IT, right? So help me out do that. And it started with the mission. Oh, on the academic side, on the student success side, on the research side, on the extension, because I'm a land grant, so there's an extension component. What are the priorities? And sharing that. And it was interesting to see that many of those silo organizations did not know about the strategies of the other ones. So that discussion helped bring everybody's awareness of the entire institution together. And then I said, okay, how do I know that I'm going to be successful? If I deliver on what you're envisioning, and that became then the foundation for the key performance indicators. And then I'm a data person. We get that. We didn't bother them with those details, but we got that collected in the back. But by elevating and attaching funding to that, the discussion then became not about what do I need as the student success person at this table, but what does the institution need? Oh my gosh, enrollment is doing really well. We have 28 years of enrollment record. But once the students start here, do they continue? We have a problem with retention. And it became a conversation that shared priorities, shared vision, that helped us figure out where do we need to put the money at. So that's how I started the effort and how the KPIs came about.
Awesome. So when you talk about governance, I want to talk a little bit about cyber resilience and trust
Oh, yes.
because everything around this is people are paranoid about what's the next big data breach that is going to happen and all of those stuff. We are seeing day in and day out to do that. So tell us a little bit about how are you positioning cybersecurity, not just as a tick in the box, compliance, we are safeguarded, physical security and logical security and whatnot. But how do you make this as a strategic enabler, right? In terms of like cloud adoption, AI, or advanced analytics?
So I was lucky at OSU, but not so lucky in different institutions. At OSU, they already had an enterprise risk management framework
Sure.
and an entire group that reported to auditing that were advisors to me. They were not part of the governance, but they were advisors to me.
Sure.
And so it was easier for me to use that language. But normally, what I would do is actually bring a discussion about risk and what does it mean to do a risk assessment,
Right.
right? Because cyber is all about risk. But
Absolutely.
if you don't speak the language of risk, you get lost on, oh, this is one of those things. Again, they're going to police me and tell me no, as opposed to us saying, no, even when something is risky, if the risk appetite for us is high, we can still do it, put some mitigations in place. But teaching people how to think that way, what is normally what I have to do. So I would advise CIOs to get that framework, risk assessment. But OSU, they already had that. So it was an easier discussion for me to say, okay, look, let's think about a discussion of risk mitigation. And if we're going to be a cloud first, because that was something I proposed to lower the administrative costs collectively. So it is not just one item, it's collectively. We're native, cloud native. Let's talk about the risk proposition on that. And do we have this? Do we not? If we have it on-prem, do you understand? Like in our case, we were not fully at that time business continuity ready. We
Right.
were disaster recovery ready, but
Right.
not fully business continuity. Big difference. And if you don't speak risk, you focus on the fact that, oh, I can't bring all that data back, but can everybody that was working on this be able to do it tomorrow? If you don't think about the business continuity, you don't. Thinking about those terms helped us get there. So, and then you have the discussion on cyber as part of that, not as a policing, but as part of the risk mitigation. How do we protect that? We do X, Y, and Z. You create rules that say, look, you can do something else, but you're taking a liability on your side. But if you do it this way, we are covering you. And there's always a trade-off, Suresh. It is a trade-off, but the enterprise risk management framework and the IT governance together help you set up the framework for all of this to happen. Cybersecurity to be at the top, not as a bottom nor a policing, but a top discussion item that helps you set up the stage for us to do both. Get what we want to do, at the same time, do it in a way that we're protecting the institution.
I love the part you talked about balancing this enterprise governance framework with IT governance because we need to do this together. But
Oh, yes.
that spins up to the next question that how do you strike the right balance between robust cybersecurity controls to a seamless user experience? Because at the end of the day, we want to create a wow experience for your staff, your students, your faculty, especially when you're talking about an environment which values openness and collaboration. So how do we balance that in terms of rigor versus that flexibility for people to do what they needed, like to bring your own devices and whatnot? Because I want to have a good experience using my own devices. I don't want to be clinged on to my own office network and stuff like that. So how do you
Yeah.
balance?
You have to start by thinking about the stakeholders. They are not all the same, right? So we did an exercise with the senior leader at the institution, a tabletop exercise to actually document what the um, risk appetite was. So, what do I need to measure everything that we're doing against? Are they ready to be risky in this area and that area? And of course, protecting students is a risk that the institution does not want not to take. So, we're always going to protect the students. So, for the students, we will do something very different, more prescribed on what you can and cannot do, providing them the ability to do the work that they need, but having a lot of controls,
Yeah.
cyber tools, all other things. So students are different because the risk appetite is low. We do not want to take risk on that, right? But let's go on the other extreme, which is faculty doing research. They're doing research, and research, by definition, means that they're going to touch stuff that they normally don't touch.
Yeah.
They're going to do collaboration with risky things.
Yeah.
So then what you do is you create the ecosystem for them to do that, including segregating the network, for instance,
Correct.
where you still have controls, but you do not have the controls that on the administrative stack you would have. They can still do some things. We have monitoring, we have some things that they need to have there, but they can freely operate in that environment. The part that is really, really squishy is this part in between,
Yeah.
where is administrative, is academic. We want to do it, we want to try new things. And it is that discussion of here, you want to play, go here, where we have a lot of controls, but you can play with new things.
Yeah.
AI is a great example. Okay, when you're playing with AI tools, we have the tools that we say you can use safely in our environment
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. But you want to explore, don't use it here, use it here.
Right.
So as long as you're doing that, and this is part on the conversation of risk mitigation with the IT governance, it is a discussion against the value proposition that the institution has with risk appetite. But it's also us using our intelligence, knowing that we're a higher ed institution. By definition, we're a learning organization.
Yeah.
We got to let people do stuff that normally we don't want them doing in every area. But if you have governance, you have data governance, you know that they're not going to play with the most confidential data. They're going to play with the directory data.
Correct.
You work with them on figuring out what's the best environment for them to work on it, and you let them loose.
Awesome. So we go and shift gears towards the funding part of it. Now let's
Oof,
start
yeah.
as a first of all, higher ed often resists seeing itself as a business. Now, as a transformative CIO, how do you create that fiscal awareness across IT and a broader campus, particularly with stakeholders who see budgeting, oh, that's not my responsibilities, it's someone else's CFO's responsibilities. How do you bring that cultural change for people to understand how important is funding all about? And this is a greater topic to discuss, but let's start with that. How do you create that change and shift with that perspective?
So I'm going to say that this is probably, can I say this categorically in my observation, the most difficult path for CIOs and
Absolutely.
frankly for directors of IT. Okay, but as you're growing in your leadership is the most difficult one because we do tend to focus on budget, which is prescribed, right? Somebody gave you a pot of money, figured out what to do with that pot of money. Sorry, I'm a finance and an MBA, and I'm speaking about finances very, very basically here, but we tend to think that way. So what I'm asking us to do, and what I would strongly encouraging prospective CIOs, but CIOs that are working in getting into transformative area, you really need to know, first of all, where is your money going? Okay, in terms of service, not I spend this much in Dell, I spend this much in AWS, that's budgeting. I'm talking about using a service catalog idea. And I have a tool that I created, makes everybody crazy every time I bring this tool. It's years, and again, because I was educated in finance, it's easier for me but starts with what is the IT stack, from networking all the way up to AI as an innovator, right now, the catalyst for innovation, right? What does it cost for us to do any and provide any of those services in terms of people that are working on that, in terms of tools that you're bringing in, and in terms of time? We never count time as part of this, okay? What does it cost? Is your money going to those areas? And what's the percentage of your total allocation of funding? That picture helps you have a true understanding of what your finances look like before you go anywhere else.
So,
Then you're going to see all of these requests coming in from your IT governance or everything that you want to do or your teams want to do. And
so,
you look at those lists and you look at where the monies are going. Are they aligned? Question number one.
right.
In my case, It was not aligned. We were spending a lot of money on areas that were not aligned with the priorities. For instance, data and research on the extension side were the least amount of funds that I was devoting, that my budget was being devoted to.
Right.
So highlighting that to us and saying, why? If that's the priority for the institution, why are we using most of our money on other things? So let's start cleaning up our own budget. So what can we do? Can we change technologies? Can we change services? Can we reduce services? What can we do to lower the costs here to reallocate those funds? That exercise is hard. That exercise makes people unhappy. That exercise makes some people decide that they don't want to be with you. Okay? Please know that as CIOs. But this is courageous step, necessary step for us then to realign the dollars that are already coming to us, because none of us have $0 coming to us.
Sure.
We all have some. Once you do that exercise, Rush, then is then aligning with the institution using the IT governance to saying, I don't have enough. In my case, for instance, data was not being funded at all. What we had was reporting. That's not data, folks. We had reporting coming out of 36 applications, but the data ecosystem was not there. Then articulating the value proposition for bringing all that data together. And today, with AI, we don't even have to create a data warehouse. How exciting is that?
Yeah.
So how in creating a business case to say we need additional funds to build that, and then you go from there, showing progress, showing the metrics, and training that it can be done, is difficult, Suresh, and it requires expertise that sometimes we don't have. So going and getting yourself educated in those areas, and whatever conferences do you go, whatever, and I would suggest in higher ed, go to Nakubo, where the business people go to, as opposed to the IT conferences where we talk all about technology, but we don't always talk money. Ask your CFO for, who can teach me about this. Be vulnerable enough to say you don't know finance. You know budget, but you don't know finance. But get yourself acclimated and really an expert on money for your organization.
Excellent. I talk about a very important part of the financial prudence that each and everyone in the value chain will have to look at. It's not the responsibility of the CFO, it's about everyone. It's all about money, honey, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So we really need to get this one in order, right? But on that part, we also need to think about, from your perspective, how do you develop financial resilience into funding models? Because you have your planned projects, programs that are running smoothly. That's great, but there are some unexpected costs, right? Murphy's law starts to apply. That scope changes happen. The consulting services, staff augmentation, compliance mandates. A lot of these things are not planned as part of your model. So how do you sustain and build that modernizing initiative so that you can track a bit budget cuts and endowment fluctuation? This has been a big, big topic for a lot of people, saying that there's budget cuts here and there. How do you survive? There's new changes to do. There's keeping the lights on initiative. There's new initiative that you want to try to do demand shaping. How do you balance that financial resilience?
So there's two ways. First, the original way, the foundational way is when you're doing this exercise I just described about finances, you're also looking for an opportunity to create a pot of innovation monies, okay, out of your own budget. Because you're doing that, figured out a way that it will be sustainable. You always have a little bit as a CIO, a little bit of money. And I suggest 1% of your budget, but I know that is a lot of money for some people. But figure it out, 1% of your money that you put in there to start, so that you have something all the time to address those things. Second one is a relationship with the CFO and with the budget folks, understanding that you are the expert on your money. So assuming you have done the exercise I just asked you to do, right? That you know what it costs to do any service. And the services are tied to the strategy of the institution. You can always have that conversation with the CFO. And if the conversation is there is no money at the institution, then it is an understanding that, look, something has to be suffering here. And
Yeah.
what would be cut? And you have to have the ability to have those discussions. Right now, we're having those discussions because the escalation of cost on software alone is creating I'm going to say a desperate need for conversations to be had about budget and about financing of IT. And that is not even talking about the emerging technologies like AI, right? Is keeping the lights on is becoming very not sustainable with the models that we had in the past. So what I have been asking and advocating in my organization is to change the business model for IT altogether.
Mm.
Because right now the funding of IT is just like a college or a department, right? It's on side by side. when it is an institutional expense. It is an institutional catalyst for everything else to happen. So should it be changed, the model itself, that it is on top of it, before the funding is allocated to everybody else? Is this so critical to the institution and so foundational that it needs to be on top? Okay,
Right.
like healthcare needs to be on top. I'm not saying we're like healthcare people. I'm talking about the money. Okay, you think about that. It needs to be that model of how we fund IT, Suresh, has to be reconceptualized. And I think there are ways that we can do that that is more sustainable. But again, we as CIOs have to do our job. We have to measure, make sure that we're being effective and efficient with every dollar coming to us. Because if we don't have that, you have room to actually do it within your budget. But assuming you have that, then addressing I call it structural funding model problems that we have, which is addressing how the institution itself funds IT.
Awesome. This is great to hear from you about the funding, the governance part of it. It's been great listening to you in this episode. I'm sure that we have one more episode to go where we will be talking about a lot more things. But thank you so much, Andrea, for taking
My
time
pleasure.
and giving us a lot of insights, particularly on the governance and funding, which is always perceived differently, and you threw a very different spin around the do's and don'ts that I would find it to be fascinating for all our members. Thanks for what you do, and I can't wait for unraveling our next episode with you as part of the Voice of CIO series.
Thank you so much. My honor.
So, friends and colleagues, I hope you enjoyed this Voice of CIO series. We have got two episodes you've done with Andrea. We are waiting for another cracker of an episode. Just stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.